let's go back though in time here.
All right.
It's December 24th, 2001, Christmas Eve, and we're just gonna talk a little bit about Larson history. So
The early years.
the early years. Irvin's father,
Andrew.
and did he come over from Sweden?
Yeah.
About when? Any idea?
I've got it written down at home. You know, if I'd have known you were going to do this, I would have done my research.
I know, I've got you here, so I'm going to take advantage of it. But
When?
okay, when he first came, they went to Pennsylvania, is that right?
Yeah.
And that was who?
The dad and
Andrew?
several of the sons worked in the coal mines.
Andrew and his brother and dad?
Several brothers.
And his father? Andrew's father was named who?
Peter,
Peter.
wasn't it?
I don't really know, to be honest with you.
Okay. But Andrew and some of his brothers worked, and then they came to Minnesota.
The father and younger children. An older girl and younger boys.
Okay. The rest
Came to
stayed in
Iowa.
the rest,
Iowa.
right. The rest stayed in Pennsylvania,
Working in the coal mines.
working in the coal mines. But some of them came to Iowa, and that's where we pick up the Larson
Okay.
family history
Right.
as we know it, right?
What,
Pretty much.
Ted, I really should have had this information. Because a year later, the father was killed in a tornado on Good Friday
And that was in
Iowa.
Iowa.
And where Frank and Anna
Okay.
lived on the home place, the Century Farm.
Right. So who was killed there?
The
Andrew's dad?
The dad.
Okay.
And I don't think any of the kids were killed, but they were hurt.
Okay.
So then, the older sons from Pennsylvania came out here to proof up the homestead.
Uh-huh.
So they started farming.
Okay. And that was in the same area as where the Larson farm that just had the centennial
It
thing
is
here?
it.
Yep.
That is it.
Okay, and that was
Frank ended up with that one, Frank
and that's
Anna.
Andrew's brother.
Right. And then
Frank.
Andrew had the land next to it. Maybe it was all part of the original one, I don't know.
Okay.
It was all in Otter Creek Township, Crawford County.
Okay, so Andrew married Amanda Falk, and as Dawn already told me, she was kind of from the Scandia,
Mhm.
Taylor's Falls, Marine area.
Yep.
And so then she married Andrew, and they lived in Iowa and farmed down there. And now, what are all of Grandpa Irvin's brothers and sisters?
Well,
What
it
were
was
their names?
Hollis and Iva, and Dad, and Ruby and Orange.
Okay.
And the kids were quite young. The mother's mother was still living in Taylor's Falls with her son, I suppose. Anyway, she went up there to visit because somebody was sick, her mom. Anyway, she died up there on the trip.
Amanda.
Amanda.
Right, so she went up to Minnesota and she got sick and died there.
Right.
And she was pretty young.
In her 40s probably.
So so the kids were still, some of them were,
But
yeah.
Orange, she was,
Orange was maybe 6 or 7, I don't know. Frank and Anna, you might say, raised him, and Ruby spent a lot of time there too.
Yeah.
so, and Frank was Andrew's brother.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he married Anna Meyer. That's how come that relationship was kind of slack to slack, because Gus Meyer married Marie,
Which is Elvira's sister. Okay, so that's where that came from.
Yeah, that's why Lyman called Dad cousin
Right,
before he was, because they had the cousins in common.
right.
It's just went on the game. They got the poles and stuff.
So, now you guys were both born in
Sac City,
Sac City. So what was Irvin doing at that time?
running a gas station for Manhattan, and what else? What was
I
the
don't know,
other one?
Independent.
Okay.
Which came first, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
really cool.
So you were living in Sac City.
Well, when
Don,
we were both born.
and
That's
Don was
25,
born in
25,
1925, and you were born in
26.
26.
And then somewhere along the line, they moved to Jefferson. He was still doing a gas station. And then Darrell was born in 29.
29. Okay, and then you moved back to the home. They moved back to the home place for a little bit, and so you were
Started school there.
okay. And Don, you called that the greenhouse.
The little greenhouse,
The little
yeah.
greenhouse. Okay.
because there was a big house and a little house.
So now, how did this work? You started that school year there. You were in first grade,
I was 4 years old. Well, they called it primary.
primary, and Don, you'd have been in a year or two ahead.
A year ahead, I guess, yeah.
So then, when you came to Minnesota, when you moved up to?
Well, because I had a report card showing that I'd been in school, although I had started when I was like 4 and a half, not even quite. They accepted me. I mean, I guess they were forced to let me continue going to school.
So that's how you wound up starting school so young then?
And graduating early.
Because they actually put you in first grade
Right.
when you came
Yeah,
to
there was
Minnesota,
there was no primary.
even though you'd have only been 5.
Right.
Okay. So when you came to Minnesota, that was 1932?
Mm-hmm.
And the first place you went to was Marine?
Yeah, it was called the Holstein Farm. About 3.5 miles out of town.
About that, yeah. Mhm.
And we walked to school.
Now, why was it called the Holstein Farm?
Well, there were the people that owned it before, somewhere along the line, just
Yeah,
like
well,
Ed
we
Johnson's.
rented.
Okay, just like I grew up on Johnson's Corner.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same thing.
So how many years did you stay in the Marine area?
Well, from 32 to 38.
And
We lived in 4 different places.
was Grandpa pretty much farming
Yeah.
most of that time?
And he did some, WPA or PWA or whatever.
Public
Whatever,
Works?
yeah.
Yeah, Public Works.
They were
Times were rough.
building a new road and a bridge over the railroad tracks, and he was working there, clearing out trees and stuff there. Yeah, that was, one winter, I guess? I can't.
Is that when they moved that little log cabin into Marine too?
No, that come a little bit later, I think.
Because I took a picture of Connie and the kids, or Connie, the kids, and I saw that on one of our trips and got pictures of it.
Of the
A
bridge?
little log cabin in
log
Marine that, and it was a historical building, I suppose. That's why they moved it into Marine.
Uh-huh.
You know.
Well, yeah, see, that was, the Centennial, wasn't it? When we-
Right, for the
You
Centennial.
know, so they
That
kind of
would have
moved it
been
in there for that.
In 36, huh?
Yeah.
So then from the Marine area, in 38 you moved to where?
Carrick,
And where was the first place you lived in Carrick?
behind the churches, behind the
Warren.
Presbyterian Church, the Warren.
Warren
The what?
Place.
Warren?
Warren Place,
Warren,
that's
they
kind of up
owned it.
behind the lumberyard,
Yeah, so-
northeast of town, I guess you would say.
Okay, so that'd been in 38.
Yep.
Mhm.
And was Irvin still basically farming then, or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when we moved up there, that was in the summer. I mean, he had some idea that it was better farming up here. So we came up to visit somebody over at Willow River. He was the brother-in-law of the milkman we had down there.
Oh, I don't really know, yeah.
Carl Reeder's brother-in-law. I can't remember their name. It wasn't the Wickstroms, was it?
No, I
But
think
we ended up visiting them. Anyway, Dad would always tell how we got stuck on the sand at Willow River, and we did. It was just...
at the Model A.
So we ended up visiting with the Wickstroms, I know that, and that wasn't the family that he originally was going to check it out
But that
with.
wasn't when we stayed up.
No. No, we didn't stay up, but then we came over to Carrick, and
That
we went
wasn't
into
the
the
same
bank.
trip, was it?
I thought it was, because I didn't remember coming more than once.
Well, did Irvin know anybody in Carrick?
Well, he knew Lyman, who lived north of Carrick, and they'd come up there and get potatoes and blueberries, and that was a big trip back
Lyman
in
Meyer.
the 30s, yeah,
Was he living at that time at the?
at Willie Kager's place.
Willie Kager's?
Straight north, yeah.
Okay. So Lyman hadn't moved over by Duquette yet?
Willie had built that house, but he was a bachelor, and Lyman and Ella moved there. I don't know if Willie had ever lived there, probably. And I don't know where he was then when Lyman and Ella lived there, back at North Branch, probably.
Hmm.
But anyway, Dad knew him, and they'd been up, when him and Orange would come up and so on. And he knew Jim Hogan, the banker, then, because of those trips. So he went in and wondered if there'd be a place we could rent around here, and Jim just happened to know about this widow that wanted to sell lock, stock, and barrel and go out to Oregon. Her name was Seidenkrantz. I don't remember her first name. But,
So that was the place right in Carrick? there.
yeah.
So he actually bought that place then?
So he bought them lock, stock, and barrel, but they could haul
Not
in their
the
car
place,
and on a
but
trailer.
But the farm equipment
Oh,
and the
okay.
Yeah,
household.
not the place, but yeah, everything.
rented
In the
the place
house and in, yeah, everything that they couldn't haul
Well, now how long did you live in that place?
till 42.
Spring of 42.
So about 4 years then. In 42, is that when you moved to the
While
place
we, yeah,
that-
while we were living there in Carrick is when he bought that place then on Larson Road.
Right.
Or
So,
was it what, tax sale or what?
I guess it was tax land, state land.
It was the first property Dad ever owned. No, it was rented.
so that was in 42 that he bought that. Okay. So and then that's of course the place that we all grew up.
Yeah.
Grew up on. So.
And then somewhere along, when did DeSanto buy the cheese factory? Was that before we moved out there or after?
No, I think
I
that was
think it was in-
before. I think we still lived downtown there. I think when we first hauled milk, we had that Model A truck. And I think, somebody broke down or something. And I think that's when we first started hauling milk. And I'm sure it wasn't for Furman. It would have been for DeSanto's.
I think it was 41. Gloria Ketchum and I were just talking about that the other day when I visited her. Because we had a farewell party for Joyce Furman and it was at my house. Did I remember it? And I said I didn't, but since then I have found pictures that show it.
So which house was that at?
The one in Carrick.
Okay. And so that was in 41. So DeSanto came up then about
Yeah.
41.
Right.
And you guys moved out to the farm
The spring of 42.
in 42. And so Don, it was about then that you started hauling milk, or?
Well, I think we had hauled a little bit, on an emergency basis, more or less. We had a Model A truck. And I suppose it was probably after we moved out on the farm before we actually started in earnest, so to speak.
Then Dad and DeSanto, they really hit it off. So, I mean, he bought one truck after another and hired drivers, and
DeSanto did?
Dad did.
Oh, so Irvin owned the trucks.
Yeah.
Well, how many trucks did he
3 or
own?
4.
So who all was driving? I mean, Don, did you drive you had one truck, and did you drive a regular route, or
Oh, yeah.
how about
And
Darrell?
Richard Eaton drove some.
And Richard Eaton, yeah.
Who else? I've heard of different ones, but
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember actually anybody else from that area driving one of our trucks.
well, you had a guy from that Abiliter, huh? He drove one of Dad's trucks, didn't he?
No,
Archie.
that was Dick. What was his name? That lived back on the farm bit where
Oh, that
where Smiths lived?
Reams buddy?
Ellis. Was it
Yeah, Dick Ellis. Yeah.
Richard Ellis. Dick Ellis. Yeah. I suppose he probably drove some of them for a while.
I don't know. But I know there was 3 or 4 trucks
Oh yeah.
with the big van,
Right. So how big of an area did you cover hauling milk?
Well, down south we went not quite to Askell. That road south of Bruno that goes up over the tracks, about 2.5, 3 miles north of Askell. We went there and went east and several places. And then a few places west of 23, a little closer to Bruno. And then from Bruno went clear out to Willow River. Both on 43 now, and then the road that's north of that, the township or county roads all around there, and then east of Bruno too, and over down 22 I guess it is now, down there like to where Wormerskirchens lived, and a guy by the name of Nolan lived just over the next hill from Wormerskirchens, went down that far. In several places, and from there to between there and Bruno,
Okay. And then all the milk that all went to Carrick
to Carrick to the cheese factory.
Got all the way up to Holyoke and far
Well, yeah,
closer to
and then,
Renshaw.
Yeah, to the north. Where did you go?
As far as Foxborough, Patsu in Wisconsin, over through Foxborough, Patsu, up through Holyoke, through Mickelson, and Old 23 went east there and up to Holyoke, and then across the hills there up by Foxborough and Dewey, And then up by Military Inn, you know, where number 4, I believe it is, crosses.
Right.
And in that area. And that's where Archie Abelater lived up in there.
Well, didn't he have a brother that drove too for a while?
Dick,
Yeah.
I don't remember. But then Archie, he got his own truck and he had a old Dodge.
Mhm.
But then, and those, then west of 23 through the Blackcliff Hills, Blackcliff and there was several,
Pleasant Valley.
Anderson and even Evers and
Sandy Lake area.
yeah, not hardly into the Sandy Lake area, just barely. It was between 23 and up by Blackcliff, north of Riverside, they called it. There was I suppose Blackcliff River actually up north of the town of Blackcliff.
So there was a town of Blackcliff,
Yeah,
and that's out east of Barnum, right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how often did you go to these places? I mean, did you make the route once or twice a week?
Oh,
or
every day.
Every day?
Every day. Once in a while in the winter, well, maybe just every other day. But, you know, it would get pretty light then, so a lot of times every other day. But otherwise, basically every day, yeah. And,
We talked a little bit about this on our way over here tonight, and Don was saying that there were like 2 farmers that would shovel their roads so that the milk truck could get in, and the rest of the people waited for the milk truck to break trail.
Right.
They
Yeah.
break trail, and he said, what happened then with the farmers?
well, they'd pass you on before you got to the next farm down the, you know, after you got out to the main road.
Waiting to get the road open so they could go to town.
Yeah, right. But George Shaw and John Solinsky, they were good old boys, you know. They would out and shovel each trail, you know. I mean, didn't
For each tire track?
after all, yeah, right. After all, nobody had tractors and loaders and stuff like that, you know. You'd had
Number
to do
2
it by
shovel.
hand.
So how long did Larson and Sons operate then as milk haulers?
Well, as I was telling Dorothy, I always figured I hauled milk for 7 years.
It was after we were married, because I remember when Weldman gets laid off in the mine, and we'd come down and spend some time here, he was thrilled, you know, to be able to haul some milk once in a while.
So,
Probably
you know, there
the old
was a little
playground or-
gap when I was in the service, of course. I didn't haul milk then. We pretty much sold the trucks we had. I had originally a 36 and 2 different 37s. And I pretty much sold them when I went in the service. But then when I come back, then I bought a couple of 42s and then a 45.
And what year was that?
Well, I go back from the service in 46.
Pretty new trucks.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. See, Roy Austin bought that one brand new. It was a 45, but they called it a 46, you know.
Mhm.
That was one of the first new after the war trucks. And then
Did
when
he do
he
some
bought
milk
a
hauling too?
48, well, then we bought that one from Roy.
So Roy had done some milk hauling. as
Oh,
well.
yes,
So what year did you go into the service?
in 44.
And what year did Darrell go in?
50,
Well,
was in there when
51,
you
I
were
think.
born. 52 maybe? 51.
I think
Okay.
it was 51 probably, yeah.
Okay, so you went in 44 and out in 46?
Yes.
Now, when did Grandpa first buy that tractor, the old A?
Well, I was in the service, 'cause I remember they sent me a picture, you know, of the new tractor out in the yard there. And Dorothy and Darrell was standing on the drawbar, I believe, and then their dog was there, Sport or whatever. Yeah, that was, so that was, I mean, those tractors were hard to come by, you know, at that time. And some way or the other, he got a connection with this, oh, who the heck was it? Had the International in Duluth. And some guy had bought this tractor with a complete set of machinery, you know, plow and a mower and, or not a hydraulic, a pneumatic lift on it. And after he got a while, I guess he decided it was really more than he needed. So it was up for sale, and then Dad bought it. It was practically new, very little used. Nice little way.
So that was one of the first tractors around here?
Pretty much so, yes. I know then, like Warren Golden, he was farming quite a bit and had cows, and he had a hay bucker and put up hay, and but then the team was pretty slow cutting with the mower, team mower, and then that tractor mower, then I would drive, and there for a while he bought another hay, and then Darrell would drive one, and I think Johnny Spute would drive one for a while.
Mowing hay all over
They
the,
were mowing hay, from Bruno more or less up to Holyoke Corner, in that, in between. Not every place, but a lot of places.
So you guys basically were hired out to mow hay.
Yes,
So you
yeah.
did a lot of mowing with those
With those
tractors.
two tractors, you bet, yeah. Yeah, they really, yeah.
but then Dad rented hay stumpage all over too and put up as far and well up to.
Yes, we pretty much pastured all the land that we had, we had quite a few cows. And so then would rent stumpage either out east of Carrick. There was a Swan Matson lived out east past John Southerton. It was quite 5, 6, 7 miles out east there. And then also rented quite a bit up by Mickelson, Mrs. Wiggins. They're just after you, Nickerson, you take the left and go around that first curve. Well, that was put up there for a couple of years. Sometimes within Les Ream, he was kind of in the cattle jockey business, buy and sell. And of course he needed hay, and so he was putting up hay too in some of that same area. And once in a while, by Darrell and Dean Ream, Les's son, they would happen to be going up towards Nickerson or something at the same time, and then and Reams had a Alice Chalmers, about the same size as the A. And of course they'd always get together and have to race. And actually his stock, just the way they were, it seemed that the Alice would go just a little teeny bit faster. And Darrell figured that there was some way we could overcome that. And the governor that down there, he took and tied a piece of string to that so he could override the governor. When the governor was trying to slow it down, he could pull it so he could go just a little fast enough to catch Dean or pass him.
They had to have some fun.
Right.
I mean, all work from
No.
dawn till dusk.
Now, didn't I see even an old newspaper clipping? Did Darrell get hurt once changing a tire or
Yeah.
something?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
That was on a milk truck.
Yeah, that was on a milk truck down at Milt's in Carrick, and had a flat, and those old trucks in those days had a ring around one side. One side of the wheel, one side of the rim was solid, but on this side they had a ring you could take out and to get the tire off that slide of the wheel. And anyway, it had it apparently, and put the tire back together and put the ring back in and started to blow it up, and it evidently didn't have that ring seated quite right in the groove that it fit in. And when it got about so much air pressure in it, it popped out, and it hit Darrell right across
Just about cut it off.
Right across the nose.
yeah, right across the nose, yeah.
How old would he have been then, roughly?
15, 16.
Somewhere 15, 16, yeah. So,
So he was in the hospital in Moose Lake for a few days, and I stayed over there with him. I had a friend that was working in the hospital, and they had nurses' quarters in the basement. So
I don't
everybody
know,
was busy on the
did
farm.
Milt bring him over? I
Yeah.
think so, that Milt, the operator of the garage, brought him over to the hospital. Yeah.
Milt Beckstrom. Yeah, I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Dr. Moe did a good job sewing up that nose.
So
And
now,
I had a kind of a little similar type accident there one day coming in with the load of milk, and we didn't have a van. It was just about 3 foot side
open
as a grain.
trailer.
It was actually a combination grain stock. So you folded up so it was higher than all stock, but usually down. And anyway, then there was about a 2.5 foot, 3 foot wide gap in the there's 2 or 3 feet over this side and 2 or 3 feet on this side and then this in the middle. Then to hold that from flopping all over, where there was kind of like a chain binder, like you've seen, hooked across there, to hold that in place. And I got down from the truck there one time and I grabbed a hold of that, to stuff. And anyway, in the process, I unhooked that thing so that handle flipped around and flopped me right across the hair, and it cut my ear right down to the. You can still see a little thing, I think, there. And then, of course, rushed into Carrick, and Milt brought me over to Mold to let him sew it up.
Yeah. So, what year did you start working for the railroad?
51.
Okay, and how about Darrell?
Darrell started in 50.
So Darrell actually started before he went into the service.
Yes.
And okay, and then he went into the service shortly after.
Yeah, and that's about the time he got married too. About that time, I figured if that was what kind of called draft board attention, he had to register to show he was married or whatever. But anyway, that's when he got drafted, about that time, and he was married.
Okay, so did he actually get married before he went into the service then, or during?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
He got married in January. I don't remember when he went to the service.
Yeah. See, and well, they had this trailer and they pulled it down by behind the tavern, the folks said, and Barb,
Right,
and, and Barb lived there for a few months or whatever.
Till she could get out. Yeah. I remember we started, Weldon and I and Jim and Joyce started down to go to their wedding. It was just a private wedding at the parsonage, but it was so cold. I mean, I think we got halfway between Warba and Floodwood or whatever, and we just turned around and went back. And 2 little babies and not much of a heater in the car and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't get to the wedding.
They got married where?
At the parsonage in Bruno, the Lutheran pastor married.
Okay.
And then they had a dinner out at Ladine's, which is picture proven, but I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
You were there.
I guess.
I got pictures.
I don't remember.
Pictures show you were there.
Well, now, didn't they live out in Washington for a while when he was in the
Well,
Yeah,
service?
he was in the service, yeah. Yeah, so when he first got in the service, he was out at Fort Lewis, and like I say, then Barbara lived in the trailer there by a little trailer by the tavern in Barnum for a few months until he got a place for her to move into or whatever. So then she drove the car out, if I remember, I believe.
I thought he came back and they went back together.
Well, maybe he did. I don't know.
I think so.
Was that the trailer that became the playhouse in later years?
No,
That was a
no,
different
this was a bigger one.
Oh, bigger.
Bigger than that, yeah.
But that was there. That did come from there. But
Yeah.
they sold that trailer apparently and
Yeah.
bought this other little one that the folks kind of used for their guest house when they run the bar, bought the tavern,
Uh-huh.
because they lived in the back of the bar.
Right.
But they had that little trailer for company.
Right. Larson's Tavern.
Right.
So now, where was Olga from? Did she grow up in the Dew Lake, Kyron area also?
Yeah.
And her maiden name was Anderson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The oldest of 9 kids.
She was the oldest of 9. And her parents' names were
Gus and Clara.
Anderson.
You know, it seemed to me that did they live where Franks were, or so it seemed to me I got the idea
No,
that
they lived on Andrew's house. They lived in the big house.
oh,
Probably after Grandma Larson died.
Yeah.
Andrew and I suppose Hollis and Iva and Dad moved into the little house, and the Anderson family rented the big house.
never knew, never heard the details, but I remember
On the
hearing
same farm.
Yeah.
that.
So it had been Frank's farm,
No,
No, Andrew's.
It was Andrew's farm.
Andrew's farm,
Yeah.
but Andrew wound up in the little house.
Yeah,
Right.
and rented out, like I say, after his wife died, and
Right.
you know,
So then Anderson's rented the big house.
yeah.
But was Olga already married to Irvin at that time?
No,
Is that how they met?
They were young.
Oh,
Well, I
okay.
suppose, but I mean, they lived in the same area
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah. And so did the Petersons, Elvira's family.
Right.
Like Elvira and Dad's mother were very close friends. They would go back and forth when each other's had babies and help, and they both died very young, leaving a young family.
Yeah, well, Mother, then afterwards, apparently, then they lived up by Booyer, which was east of Kyron, I believe. You know, it was all in that same area,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
White Car and Boyer. The Boyer River was the one that went down through there, and so it was right up in that area. And,
So any recollections of Christmases when you were a kid?
Well, we remember that one when I was 4 years old after I'd started school.
What?
Yeah, you're older,
Actually,
you
we were
tell
going.
them.
There was a school. We went to this. We started school right up on top of the hill, right on the edge of the Larson property. And then there was about 2 miles east of that was another country school, right straight down that road. Went across the main highway and then another. And anyway, we had apparently a joint Christmas program. So us kids from this our school went down to this other school. I remember we were walking, you know, and had this program, whatever. And then we came back, and when we were living in the greenhouse, and when we come in and opened the doorway, it was all smoke. And
It's a wonder it didn't ignite, you know, because it was just thick smoke.
and apparently it had burned the curtains right by the table.
And it burned a big hole in the table.
And it burned, you know, it didn't really burn a hole, but
Well,
it charred it, you know,
yeah.
a foot and a half or so, and that got all charred, and everything got all smoked.
We had, I don't know if the Christmas presents had been opened, but there was a box of blocks, and many of those blocks were charred. And I don't know now if they're still, when we closed up the farm in August, somebody got the box of blocks,
They're right here.
but they're right here, okay? Are there any of the charred ones in there?
I don't know. We'll have to look.
But anyway, a lot of them were charred.
Huh. So that was somebody's Christmas
I mean, it's
present
just
for that year,
amazing because there was a kerosene lamp, you know,
Uh-huh.
but they must have turned that out. I mean, how it started and why it didn't take the whole house, you know, is just a miracle.
Yeah, but apparently the house must have been fairly tight.
Must have been
And
tight.
small, and just didn't get enough air to get
Yeah.
really going, evidently.
Huh.
And I remember too, at that same Christmas, I got a little Caterpillar tractor that you wound it up, you know, clockwork. It had little rubber treads on it.
Mhm.
I know that we used to take like the
Table
table leaf and put up to the chair, or, you know, up to the rung or whatever, and then it would climb up that. You know,
Mhm.
I think I remember that too. I don't think I got a doll that Christmas, but I got one the first year we lived in Marine.
Uh-huh.
A beautiful doll from two of Mom's sisters, Evelyn and Jane. So I named the doll Eva Jane,
Eva Jean.
and I had it for many, many years.
So, do you remember having lutefisk at Christmas time?
Every year.
Was it always Christmas Eve?
Oh, I'm sure.
I don't remember it in Iowa, but after we moved to Minnesota.
If the Iowans were smart enough to maybe have ham, is that what you're telling me?
No, they had lutefisk. We were just too young to remember it.
How old were you when that
4
fire
years
with the
old.
blocks?
4.
Okay.
So it was like 71 years ago.
Yeah, like I say, it's really, you know, just more luck than sense or whatever that the whole house, because it was just a small house.
It had
you
to have
know.
been tight enough
It
so that
probably
there
was
wasn't enough
much
air.
bigger than this room,
Yeah,
actually,
right,
though. It was
yeah.
a couple of rooms, or maybe even
Yeah.
3, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But they had that round living room table that was there with this lamp on it, and evidently somewhere or the other.
Because the burn was deeper right in the center, and then of course right in the very center underneath where the lamp was, it wasn't, you know, but, and we had that table and used it like that for 40 years or more. And
Wow.
finally there was enough money to have that top refinished, and it was the most beautiful table. And why he ever sold it, I'll never know. It was a beautiful round table.
You say you had that table for about 40 years?
Yep,
Looking like that?
yeah. Well, we always kept it covered.
It wasn't
Well,
that
right,
deep,
yeah.
you know.
It, no,
but,
it was probably from, 3/8 of an inch, so I bet, or closer. No, I don't
So in
know.
other words, I came to Minnesota with you and
Oh, you
wound up
bet,
about
yeah.
the old farm and...
It came out to Larson Place, yeah.
Right.
I don't remember who refinished it. They did a good job.
So, how did you guys do Christmas as far as like the tree? Did you have?
I remember we'd
Christmas
have candles on it, and we'd light them for about 10 minutes on Christmas Eve, and Dad was there with a bucket of water. But But we did go through the motions of, having, remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
And then I remember probably in, 38 or 9, 42 or 3, after we'd moved out to the farm, Darrell and Orange, the big spenders, pooled their resources and bought some bubble lights for the tree.
Which we had for many, many years.
Many, many
One string
years.
of 7 bubble
Yep.
lights.
Yep.
Yep.
We had some other plain bulbs too,
Right,
but,
yeah.
but
But
they-
But that was, of course, after you got electricity.
and that first electricity was a 32-volt light
Yeah,
plant.
yeah.
Oh, what?
A light
32 volt
power
direct
plant.
current, it just had 16 2-volt cells out in that little shed out where the garage was, there was
Right.
a little.
That's why we called it the powerhouse.
Yeah,
That's right,
And that's before you had
Yeah.
electric lines coming in.
right.
right.
So you had your own little makeshift, was
So
a
they kind
gas
of knew that was
generator then, or-
coming, so he kind of wired and then had that, so he had lights.
It was wired for 110, but we just,
Before the actual power line got there, so when they come, we were pretty much ready for it.
and I think we had lights, a toaster, and a radio.
So what year would the electric line have come in up there? Later 40s?
Well, that
Oh,
was-
just
yeah.
after I had my tonsils out, but before I got married. Yeah,
And you got
Yeah,
married
it
in
was
49?
after the war,
Yeah. probably 47 or
Because
so.
I remember when we were wiring or trying to get stuff to wire the house, why we'd drive all around the country, and get a little of this and a little of that. And I remember once went down and got Uncle Charlie, to work on that chimney,
Right,
and we stopped down at, I think it was Ogilvy, and there was a hardware store, whatever, and they had some of that stuff, and so we got some there, went, stopped going down and got, I don't remember what we got, but wire and, and fixtures.
and Uncle Charlie was Grandma Anderson's brother. Charlie Johnson, they lived in Monticello.
Charlie Johnson? And he was whose brother?
Clara Anderson, my mother's mother,
Okay, Clara was Olga's mother.
right,
So Clara was a Johnson.
right.
So Clara Johnson married who?
Gus
Gus
Anderson.
Anderson.
Gus Anderson. Okay.
And they lived down at Lakeview, Iowa for,
The Andersons.
yeah. That's what I said, yeah.
Right. So did you have any other Christmas traditions? Any other foods that were, besides lutefisk, that was a big thing at Christmas time?
Oh, head cheese. You couldn't live without head cheese.
Did you have that often or more just for
After they
special
butchered a
occasions?
pig.
Right. Yeah.
I don't remember. We didn't have nearly the tradition or whatever like Weldon's family did. I mean, they always had the rice pudding with an almond or something in it, that whoever got that was supposed to be extra lucky that year or something.
Oh.
But cranberries and
Lingonberries
Lingonberries.
available.
So, how about Dad then? You said on their side they did more of the
they had more
traditions
Swedish
as far as-
tradition, yeah. Because they lived with Oscar's mother for a while. I don't know if it was right after they were married, but when Weldon was young, and Weldon and Bob and Doris, I'm sure it's before Carolyn was born, that they lived in her house. In fact, that picture I gave you of Dad with the little wagon, I'm sure that was her house.
His
It's Grandma's house.
grandma's house. Elvira's mother.
No, Oscar's mother.
Oscar's mother. And where would
Elvira
that
was
have
a
been?
Peterson. That was in Isanti. And I always
Oscar's father,
had died, his
right,
mother.
and his mother was in the Isani area?
And she had remarried, but I think he probably had died too. Carolyn and I had a discussion, and I'd like to get it from somebody else. See, I thought she had married Mickelson first and had this family, and then he died and she married somebody else. But Carolyn thought that she'd married somebody else, didn't have children, and married whatever his name was, Albert, I think. And they had,
Oscar's dad
Yeah.
was Elbert.
I think,
Uh-huh. And his mother was
Christine.
Christine, right, yeah. So now Elvira, though, grew up in Iowa.
Deloitte, Chiron area.
And when would she have come to Minnesota? Or not until after she was married?
Right, yeah. And I don't know how they met, her and Oscar.
Because Oscar was
from
the
Isanti.
Isanti area. He was not from Iowa.
No, but maybe he went down there to work, you know, times were rough. He probably was down there farming or harvesting or something. I don't remember.
Okay.
Having heard the story.
Right, but three of my grandparents all basically were raised in the same small area down there.
Right.
And
And
so
they're all
some of-
buried, well, in the same cemetery.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So the great-grandparents would be buried somewhere.
Well, the Chiron Cemetery.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Any other stories or anything relating to anything else that really impressed
A
you?
little while ago when we were talking, I was kind of thinking of something, but now it's slipped my mind again.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Well, I think.
How I learned to drive.
How did you learn to drive?
Well, when we lived on Larson Road, dump road, well, it wasn't even dump road in those days.
no,
It was
no
just
dump
a
road.
road, I guess.
Hardly
And
that.
yeah, they were putting up hay, you know, in this area. And I remember Carl Spute was staying with us then. He built the cupboards in the kitchen down there. And of course, Dad and Don and Daryl and Johnny Spute. Johnny spent the summers with us from Memorial Day to Labor Day until he got old enough to get a job and stay home with his mom in Stillwater. But anyway, Mom would pack up the noon lunch, and Carl and I would bring it to him. And I think the farthest I ever drove was over here to Linnaeus. And he laughed and kidded me about that for years, how, you know, I didn't need a road. I just drove on the hayfield. So that's how I learned to drive. It was a coupe. What, 46?
36.
36?
36, yeah.
36. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, we bought that from a guy that we hauled milk for up by, well, west of Holyoke Corner, up in the Black Hoof, you know, in that area. We have a name of Evers, Bill Evers. He had that 36 Ford coupe. And when we were hauling milk, well, you'd see it sitting there, you know. And finally, well, he was going to get a different car. And Dad just loved that coupe. So we wound up getting that 36 coupe.
Had Irvin owned a car before that?
Oh, yeah.
He had cars in Iowa.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But you'd have to drain the water out of them in the winter, you know.
Yeah, Model Ts especially, yeah, I'd take them. And then you'd catch the water if you could, or otherwise, well, depending on, you know, and take it in and warm it up so you'd have some warm water to pour in the car so it's more likely to start than, you know, than that. And also sometimes with the Model T you would jack up one hind wheel because there was drag in the transmission evidently, and if you just, well, then the wheel could turn so it was less drag on the motor, you know, it would
I don't think
So-
that.
jack up one hind wheel to
Make
when
it
they were
easier to
cranking
start,
it.
huh?
Yeah.
Make it easier to crank.
Yeah, well, yeah. More likely to start, yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, if a guy could, you know, think of all that stuff with just a little bit of
Chronological
chronological order or something, you know.
Could write a book.
Yeah, see if you could put it on a computer, then you could do it, and then you could
Go back and
rearrange
insert
it.
that paragraph.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks.
Sure. Oh, you're still there.
I mean, and like now, and it was kind of on the next road
Yeah,
over.
yeah.
And I know I used to walk there. I suppose you did too, probably. We would walk from the greenhouse over once after, you know, what, Bringleson's?
Oh, yeah.
You
yeah.
know, that
Did
they-
they live on Clover Hill afterward?
I think so. I think that Bringleson's lived on Clover Hill, and I don't remember just what the connection with them was either, but if it's just that they moved on a place where the folks
I
had
suppose
lived or
good
whatever,
friends. Well, good friends, yeah.
you know, go across, yeah. And I remember be putting up hay on the, what the hell, on the bottom land they called it, you know, by the creek, out, little damper so the hay grew better. And I remember that they would be putting up hay with those sweep rakes, they called it. You'd have a horse here, and over there about 10 feet was another horse, and then in between you had a thing with kind of teeth similar to on the front end of the tractor loader, you know, only longer. And it'd taken, and
You were 5 years old, you remember that?
oh yeah, I'm just like I was yesterday.
Good, I sure don't, I was never a fan.
And I remember that they had a overshot stacker that they'd take it up, and they had a thing that, they called it an overshot stacker. You'd bring the hay in there and back the team out, and then the hay would stay there, you know, in the team. And then this other stacker that had another horse over there would pull it up and stack it. I can remember that just plain as day. It really must have, you know.
Made an impression on you.
Yes.
Well, that was physics.
Yeah. And I think someplace I got a picture or two of, you know, that operation.
I could probably put my hands on it, even as we speak.